Hi, this is Joe again with another review. For the sake of this video, I'm going to be discussing the latest ESPN 30 for 30 film, which is titled Once Upon a Time in Queens, which is basically a documentary about the 1986 Met team. And of course, if you just look behind me, you know I'm a kind of an expert in the 86 Met team. And since I was a Met fan, I turned 15 years old, literally in the middle of the 1986 season. So I have very fond memories of that team. And when this documentary first, I know I'm about 2 months late, because the film originally aired in September, and I first getting around doing a review of it now. But Once Upon a Time in Queens is a kind of a long documentary. It's a 4-hour documentary. It's divided up into 4 parts, 4 1-hour episodes, and it aired on back-to-back nights, and you get the whole, film in there. Now, there are a couple of problems I have with this film, which I'm first going to get into. It starts off about how bad the New York Mets were in the 1970s, particularly the mid and late 70s, when the Mets were basically the worst team in baseball at that time. I mean, it was a few years after they won the World Series in 1969, and so of course in the 1970s, when Gil Hodges died, just before the 1972 season started, and of course the original owner, John Payson, died after 1975. When John Payson died after the 1975 season, so in 1980, when the Mets were sold to Nelson Doubleday and the Fred Wilpon, the Mets were like the worst team in baseball. They traded Tom Seaver, they traded Jerry Koosman, and all the players that made the Mets winners in 1969 were now all gone. And the Mets were not drawing anybody. They make all kinds of mistakes and stuff. And then the Mets finally decided, and the Mets owners decided to sell the team in 1980, and that's when the film really gets kicked in, when they started to build the team up. Excuse me, which is what eventually became a contending team. And of course, I'm talking about when Mets hired Frank Cashen, who was the general manager of the Baltimore Orioles when they had the run in the late 60s and early 70s. To build this team, and he said, it's probably going to take me about 5-6 years to have a winning team here. And Doubleday and Wilpon says, okay, do what you have to do, and we'll be very patient. Well, it did end up taking 5 years for the Mets to be a successful team. Actually, 4 years. In 1984, when the Mets started becoming a successful team, but it took until 1986 for them to actually finally win one. So it became more and more focused on knowing the 86 team eventually in this film, but also focused on the 2 big name players that came up from their ranks, which was of course Greg Glenn and Dallas Strawberry. But I say focus a lot of, because of their eventual drug and alcohol problems down the line, and Glenn is still having his problems with drugs and alcohol, and Strawberry, to his credit, has cleaned himself up and is now an ordained minister now. But Glenn still has his drug and alcohol problems even to this day. And during the 86 season, of course, he was more heavily into drugs, more heavily into alcohol and stuff like that. And of course it affected him during the 1986 season, and of course beyond, because the first 2 years he was so dominant. The first 2 years he won the Rookie of the Year in 84, won the Cy Young in 85, became the youngest Cy Young winner ever, and he still has strikeout records that still last to this day. He still has the Major League record for most strikeouts by a rookie pitcher. I think it was like 276 strikeouts. The next year, in his Cy Young year, he only struck out 268, so it's only 8 less than the year before. but he still won the Triple Crown pitching, led the league in ERA, strikeouts, and wins. He went 24-4 the year before, and so, but in '86, he only won, I think, like 16, 17 games. Didn't blow everybody, even though he ended up striking out 200 batters, but it wasn't as lights out as he was the first 2 years in the Mets. So everybody was wondering, oh, what's wrong with Gunn? What's wrong with Gunn? Well, the problem with Gunn was that he was on drugs. That's the reason, because he was so strung out on drugs that affected his performance during that whole entire 1986 season, and he was never the same pitcher since. For the rest of his career, it was never the same anymore after that. And I'm trying to speak over the stupid motorcycles outside and everything. So they focus a lot on Gunn and Strawberry. And another thing that they focus on a lot in the documentary, again, the title is Once Upon a Time in Queens, was how all the players were carousing. They always go out to bars, they always go out womanizing, being on drugs, being on, fooling around with women every night, whether it be hookers or groupies, always have fooling around with them, and so that's one thing that another thing that they shouldn't talk about, on the carousing that was going on with the '86 Met team, because it was carousing going on. But they spend so much time talking about that, and they pretty much ignore, for the most part, how dominant the Mets were on the field that year. They kind of left upon some of the wackier ways the Mets had won ball games that year. And there's one particular game when the Mets played the Giants at Shea Stadium, when the Mets were losing actually. And it was like either the 8th inning or 9th inning, two Giants infielders, Jose Uribe and I think Robbie Thompson, I think it was. Both of them collided by second base, dropped, and they ended up dropping a pop up. The Mets ended up tying the game and ended up winning it because of that error. It was crazy. I mean, people talking about the World Series, the Buckner game. But there was plenty of times when the Mets won games in wacky fashion. It was like that all year. I mean, they had all the breaks that year. There was one particular game, like on July 3rd, when Ray Knight struck out 4 times against the Astros. It was a big series in Shea Stadium, Mets and Astros in July 4th weekend. And it was also the same weekend that New York City had a big party for the Statue of Liberty, because it was the 100th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty, and they renovated the statue. They fixed it up, put a new torch on the statue. They took out the original torch. They took that off the statue, and they put a brand new torch on the statue to celebrate its 100th anniversary. And so they had a whole big celebration on network television for it. And Ray Knight, Darryl Strawberry had, I think, like 2 home runs in that game. Ties up the game, and the Mets were losing in the 9th inning. And I think they were losing like 5-4 or something in the 9th inning. Or 5-3. Darryl Strawberry hits a 2-run homer, ties the game, bottom of the 9th inning. And Ray Knight, I think it was the very next pitch or the first pitch to Ray Knight, in his at bat, after striking out 4 times already in that game, he ends up winning the game on a home run. Mets win. I remember actually seeing that game on TV. And the next day, my family and I went to Cape Cod for the weekend the next day. So I remember that game very, very well. And I mean, stuff like that, they didn't mention it that much on this documentary. Or some of the crazier ways. I mean, they did show highlights of the game they just mentioned. But they didn't show enough of the games on television that the Mets had played, some of the wackier ways of how the Mets won. Because the Mets came back from behind, I think, like about 39 times during the regular season that came from behind 39 times to win the game. I think it was like I'm not. I think it was like 39 games in the regular season. I'm not sure if they because they mentioned that during the World Series. Rich Scully mentioned that it came back from behind 39 times. I think they also included the playoffs in the World Series, so it's like altogether 39 times to win a game, which is a lot. Come from behind wins. But they never mention that much. So they focus more on the carousing, the drinking, the drug use, hooking up with women, and every city the Mets are playing in. They focus on all that stuff, but they never really focused on what they did on the field and how they dominated the league. The Mets won 108 regular season games, which no National League team has matched since then. In the 35 years since then, no National League team has won 108 games since then. Well, you could say, what about the Dodgers and Giants this year, 2021? Well, the Giants won 107, one game off from tying the 86 Mets record, and Dodgers won 106, so like 2 games off. So there's only 2 teams in the National League since divisional play started in 1969 that won 108 games. I'm talking about National League teams now. That's the 75 Reds and the 86 Mets. That's it. No other National League team since the 86 Mets have won at least 108 games. So you can say, who's the better? I mean, it goes to show you how dominant the 86 Mets team was, when no other team since then has won that many. I think the Braves back in the 90s, I think it was the 90 Braves, the 98 or 99 Braves won. I think they won like 105 or 106 games 1 year. So that's why we're doing the Braves won when they won 14 straight divisional titles. I think the most they ever won in 1 year was 106. But goes to show you, no other team has won as much as the 86 team has in the National League since in the 35 years since then. It's been 35 years now, and no other team has won that much. But of course, and they also went into details in the documentary about the playoffs and about the World Series, about how the Mets came back in several games against the Astros, particularly games 3, and losing game 1 in a heartbreaking fashion. Game 1, they came back, won game 2. They came from behind in game 3 with Lane Dexter home run. They lost game 4 in Mike Scott. Came back in game 5 and won that one. Came back in game 6 and won the pennant in the classic 16-inning game. And then, of course, how the Mets came back in the World Series. Of course, they went into details about the Buckner game, of course, and how the Mets won Game 6 and, of course, Game 7. And, of course, what happened at the ticker tape parade when Dwight Glenn didn't show up because he was such in a drug-induced stupor that he didn't show up for the ticker tape parade. And talking about that story, and we also talked about the fact about what happened to Ray Knight. The morning of the parade, the ticker tape parade, which it should have been like a day or two later. I would have went to it, but they held it the very next day. Well, the World Series ended on Monday night, October 27th, 1986, because it remained out the night before. So the final game, the 7th game of the World Series, was held on Monday night, which I think to this day has the record for the highest rated World Series game ever, even beating out Monday Night Football. And the New Jersey Giants was playing the Redskins in Monday Night Football, and outdrew the NFL. The 7th game of the World Series outdrew the Monday Night Football game, because of what happened in Game 6. So people tune in to Game 7 to see what happened in that game. And they have the ticker tape parade on the 28th which I was kind of bummed out about because I actually was stupid enough. I actually went to school and I got my had a science test that day. I complained to the teacher, if you didn't give a test today, I would have went to the Met Parade. Thanks to you, I'm missing a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I said to her, thanks to her, I'm missing out on a once in a lifetime opportunity. and she didn't know what, and the teacher didn't know what to say. But there's neither here or there. But they also talk about what happened on Rainy Night, the day of the parade. That Frank Cashin was going to give Rainy Night a 1-year contract with either a $500,000 raise or I think it was like a $5,000 raise, and just a 1-year contract. But Rainy Night says, I don't care about the raise. I don't care about how much money you want to pay me. It's up to you. I just want a 2-year contract. I want to finish my career as a Met. I just want a 2-year contract. I don't care how much money you want to give me. I just want you to give me a 2-year contract. That's it. That's the only thing I want. Is a 2-year contract. And Frank Cashin says, I'm not giving you a 2-year contract. I'm only authorized to give you a 1-year contract, and that's it. So Rainy Night left and went to, I think, the Orioles. I think it was either the Orioles or Detroit, the Tigers the next year. And the reason why Frank Cashin, even though it didn't put into the documentary, the reason why Frank Cashin didn't offer Rainy Night more than a 1-year contract was because there was a collusion thing that was going on at that time. Where no team, of the 26 teams that was in baseball then, no team was want to offer a deal to a free agent. So that's what that was all about. So they went into that story. And of course, they also went into this thing we have with Kevin Mitchell, who was a rookie in 1986. He played all over the place. The only 2 positions he didn't play was, I think, catcher and pitcher. He played 7 out of 9 positions on the field during that game. And I think he probably would not have played all those positions if they didn't reduce the roster from 25 players to 24 that year. Now I think they raised it to 26 now. But at that time it was like 24 players instead of the usual 25 players on a Major League team. So because of that, he was playing all over the place, and after the 1986 season, the Mets traded him to San Diego for Kevin McReynolds for an everyday left fielder, which the Mets really didn't have at that time. The Mets did have George Forster, who the Mets signed to a big 4 or 5 year contract, but he was a bust here in New York. Even though he won an MVP with Cincinnati in '77, I think it was, he had 52 home runs. But as soon as he came to the Mets, was past his prime already when he was with the Mets. He struck out more than he hit. And the Mets released him after he said some comments that the Mets were promoting all the white players and not the black players on the team. Calling the Mets owners a bunch of racists. So the Mets traded him. And the funny thing is, the 2 of the big stars on the 1986 Mets were black. And the guy who George Forster was platooning with in left field was Kevin Mitchell, and Kevin Mitchell was black. So I don't know where the hell he's getting off with the racist comments from. So the Mets released him, and they replaced him with Lee Mazzilli, who was white. So it kind of goes into what George Forster was saying a little bit. I know going long in this video here, but they ran into the whole George Forster. And one thing they really didn't go after all that much was the Coolers incident. Now, in case you know what the Coolers incident was, in July 1986, the Mets had a 4-game series with the Astros. It was the first series after the All-Star break, which ironically, the All-Star game was in the Astrodome. And 4 Met players, Tim Teufel, Rick Aguilera, Bob Ojeda, and Ron Darling, all got arrested in a bar called Coolers. That's with the C, folks. Coolers, not Hooters. All 4 got arrested by off-duty cops who happened to be working there as bouncers. And they beat up Tim Teufel. They were also celebrating the fact that Tim Teufel's wife recently gave birth to, I think it was the first child or something. And I know she recently gave birth, but I don't think I'm not sure if it's the first child or not. But anyway, they're out celebrating that, and they said to me, "Oh, come on, Tim, let's celebrate the birth of your child." I said, "Oh, okay." So they went out and they got beat up by off-duty cops working as bouncers in this bar. And the thing got settled out of court. All the Met players pleaded no contest to it, and the bar closed. According to Jeff Pearlman's in Jeff Pearlman's book, The Bad Guys Won, the bar closed like 5 years later. And in Houston, they were printing up T-shirts saying "Houston Police 4, Mets nothing," and they brought that up. But one thing that they didn't bring up because they focused so much on the drinking and the carousing stuff, they really didn't focus that. I mean, they focused a little bit on the Coolers incident, but the thing that they didn't focus on at all was the fact that the New York Mets were supposed to have had home field advantage in the 1986 playoffs and didn't get it. Now, previously, I had done a video on the 86 Mets previously, and I went into more details in that video, so check out that video for those of you who haven't watched it. But the truth of the matter was, the reason why the Mets did not get home field advantage in the 1986 playoffs was that you have to understand that the playoff format was different back then than it is today in 2021. Because don't forget, you only had two divisions, the number one. Number two, you did not have a wild card team. That didn't come until like 8 years later. Well, technically for 1994 season, even though we had no playoffs or World Series that year. It was supposed to start in 1994 when you had the wild card team. But it really started in 95 because of the strike, 94 strike. So before then, you only had two divisions, Eastern Division and Western Division. And every other year, they will alternate the home field advantage. From 1969 through 1993, they alternated the home field advantage every year. What I mean by that, like one year the Eastern Division will have home field, and the next year will be the Western Division champion. Right, have a team that were in both leagues. We have the home field advantage the next year, and they also alternated the home field advantage for the World Series, and of course, and also for the All-Star games. Like one year, whoever wins the pennant in the National League at the home field, and the next year will be the American League team, and so on. In 1985, Major League Baseball expanded the playoffs. What it means is, from 1969 to 1984, they had a best 3 out of 5 series. And the first two games were held in one ballpark. And games 3, 4, and 5, that is if we went the full 5 games, was held in the other ballpark. And in 1985, they expanded it from a 3 out of 5 to a 4 out of 7. So you had 2 games in one stadium. The middle of 3 games, which usually would be on the weekend, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday, depending when the playoffs started, and the other ballpark, and game 6 and 7 back in the other ballpark. And in 1985, Major League Baseball has the 4 out of 7 series for the first time, and the 2 teams that had the home field advantage were the 2 teams in the Western Division. So in 1986, whoever won the Eastern Division in both leagues had the home field advantage, no matter who the teams happened to be. And it just happens to be the 2 teams that played against each other in the World Series that year, the Red Sox and the Mets. While the Mets played the Astros in the National League playoffs, while the Red Sox played the Angels in the American League playoffs. While the National League playoffs started on a Wednesday night. And the Red Sox series started the night before on Tuesday. So Wednesday and Thursday games were supposed to be at Shea Stadium in New York. Friday was an off day, on travel day. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for games 3, 4, and 5 was supposed to be in Houston. Travel day on Tuesday. And games 6 and 7 was supposed to be here in New York at Shea Stadium. Well, on the day of game 4, and the Mets Astros series, which was on a Sunday, The Houston Oilers, who are now the Tennessee Titans of the NFL, shared the Astrodome with the Houston Astros. They didn't have a separate stadium for the two teams, like they do now. For the Astros and the Texans, they both have separate stadiums now, so no more conflicts now. By that time, both the Oilers and the Astros both shared the Astrodome. And so what happened was the Oilers had a home game schedule on the same day as Game 4 of the National League playoffs between the Astros and the Mets. So the NFL called Major League Baseball, particularly National League President Chuck Feeney, and he says, you have to move your game. We are not moving our game to accommodate the playoffs games. So what the National League did was they flipped the playoffs. In other words, instead of the Mets having home field, the Houston Astros had home field, and that nearly cost the Mets that pennant, that decision. Because they had to play Game 6 and possible Game 7 on the road. And luckily, for the Mets, they won in spite of that. In spite of getting screwed out of the home field advantage, the Mets won in spite of it. But, like I said, it nearly cost the Mets the National League pennant. And I felt it wasn't right. And it wasn't made that big of a deal at the time. And all these years later, it still hasn't made that big of a deal. And of course, if you look on YouTube, if you look at for Keith Hernandez Q&A, a question and answer session at Citi Field back in 2012, I actually asked Keith Hernandez, how come none of the players ever made a stink over this? That the Mets were supposed to have home field advantage, and they got screwed out of football because of a stupid football game the Mets lost. How come you and the other players never made a big stink over it? Because they should have been made a stink out of it, and none of you guys ever did. And Keith came at a joke out of it at my expense. He said, "Oh, big deal, we won anyway." And I said, "Yeah, you won." And he said to me, "Yeah, you won in spite of it. But how come we didn't complain over it? I mean, the Mets won 108 games with the best record in the major leagues and didn't have home field in the playoffs. It wasn't until 20 years later, in 2006, when the Mets finally were able to play Game 1 of a playoff series at home. And it was the first round of playoffs against the Dodgers. And I said, and nobody even mentioned it at the time, and they still haven't. 15 years later, they haven't said a word about that this was the first time ever that the New York Mets ever played Game 1 of a playoff series in a home ballpark. It's never happened. It didn't happen in 69, it didn't happen in 73, it didn't happen in 86, it didn't happen in 88, it didn't happen in 1999, and it didn't happen in 2000. So six previous times the Mets have played in the playoffs, they never played Game 1 at home. Ever. Either in the playoffs or in the World Series, except for the 1986 World Series. With the exception of the 1986 World Series, they never played Game 1 of a playoff series in the home ballpark. I'm talking about in the playoffs. In the World Series, they did. They played Game 1 of the 86 World Series at home. But other than that particular World Series, they never played Game 1 of a playoff series at home. Never played Game 1 at home. Until 2006. And also in 2015 as well. 2006 and 2015 were the only 2 years when the Mets had Game 1 or played Game 1 at home in the home ballpark. They never done it before, and of course they haven't even played in the playoffs since 2015. No, they played the one-game playoff in 2016. But since 2016, they haven't played in the playoffs since then, and they never played Game 1 at home before then. Before 2006. And that, another thing they should have played up more, and they never done it. They haven't done it. But not talking about the Mets getting screwed of the home field advantage of the '86 playoffs. They never discussed it in this documentary. So that's my major nitpick, is that they never discussed, the Houston the playoff screw job for the Mets, and they spent too much time talking about all the drinking and carousing and stuff. Those are mainly my two complaints of the documentary. But it was well made for what it was. I mean, they did mention, but what I think the third nitpick is that they didn't focus enough on what happened on the field. Except when they got into the playoffs and World Series, then they talked about what happened on the field. But they really didn't talk. The three nitpicks I have is that they didn't talk about the playoff screw job. They spent too much time talking about all the carousing going on in the '86 Mets, and they didn't talk about enough about what happened on the field and how hated the 1986 Mets were. They didn't focus enough on the hatred that the whole National League had on the New York Mets, because they actually were a winning team. They were dominant. They were cocky. They rubbed it into people's face. They didn't spend enough time on that. I mean, they spent so much time with the carousing stuff, they didn't spend much time on the field. So that's my criticism of the documentary. But it was, I'm not going to hate myself for watching this documentary again and again. But what they did with it was good and entertaining for what it was. I can't believe it's been over 30 minutes talking about this thing. Because I know now, because the '86 Mets were my boys this summer. That's why I know so much about. As you can tell from behind me, I have a picture of the Buckner era behind me, and that is autographed, by the way, by Buckner and Wilson. But to leave out the playoff screw job. I mean, how can you not put that in? How can you not discuss the NFL talking Major League Baseball when they hold the playoffs? Because the thing is, the ESPN spent so much money on broadcasting not only NFL games but college games, they don't want to criticize them, which is ridiculous. Which is a joke. It's a joke that they didn't bring any of that up. So that's my review of the '86 Once Upon a Time in Queens, the story of the '86 Mets. Please click on the video. Please subscribe to my channel. Please forward this video on your Facebook pages. And check out all my reviews and on my YouTube channel at RallyC.com. That's all WDY. C.com. That's the homepage of Rally Reviewer. Chris Lee Moore. And please check out all of his videos on his website. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.